Over the years, my mother has been prescribed an inordinate amount of medication, often without care and attention. At its worst, this resulted in her being admitted to hospital to attend a rehabilitation program to safely withdraw from the high-dosage cocktail of drugs that had been prescribed to her. She described these prescriptions as, I'm quoting now, the chemical koshes they tried on me. And they say I don't take my medication, but I know what suits my body from not. I'm not an expert, but I refuse to have a chemical kosh that will have me walking around like a zombie. And another thing, they over-medicated me because they never reviewed my case, just added things. That was the reason I was falling over, the reason I broke my leg. I have been in every aspect overlooked. There is a recurrent lack of care inherent in the treatment my mother has received. On offer is a form of treatment that overlooks her subjecthood, instead focusing most directly on her diagnosis. This has had many physical and emotional consequences. For example, her experience of this system has led to an inability in others, often including myself, to empathize and relate with her. For my mother, this is what has been taken away from her as a result of her medical and personal history being dictated by the NHS. My mother characterized her journey through the system as one that began with feelings of shame and developed into a sense of loss. She says, "All I know is when I first went in, I was so ashamed." And I ask her, "Are you still ashamed?" And she says, "It's not so much ashamed. What it does, because I've been in the system so long, other people with mental health I can talk to, sort of. But Joe Blocks, whether it's in the family or not, I have a feeling of being the odd one out. My history is being treated in the mental health system. I haven't had that much, although I've tried, of normality. I feel very cut off from ordinary people, as John Legend would say. And that is why I don't sort of mix and things, because, I don't want to talk about it all the time. It just means I have lost so much really through childhood trauma." Paulette's experiences of the mental health system have become a barrier between herself and others. As she says, her history is so bound up with the illness, treatment, stigma, and being locked up. This then affects her relationships, and as others often cannot see past her illness, and she has been so deeply changed by her experiences of treatment, that she struggles to form bonds with those unable to understand this part of her. This struggle occurs both within and beyond her family relationships. Paulette, for much of her life, has been left to fight a battle against the agents of mental health, against the agents of the mental health system, psychiatrists, doctors, care coordinators, alone. She's been treated as less than human on so many occasions. Her person had degraded in countless interactions, in everyday exchanges and mental health reviews, meetings. The sad truth is that my mum's illness stems from being abused as a child. The misfortune of her childhood has been transformed into a long-lasting curse that justifies her exploitation within a broken system. A lost voice, being black, disabled, and female. The context of silence is varied and multidimensional. Most obvious are the ways racism, sexism, and class exploitation act to suppress and silence. Voices of oppressed people are seldom heard. These voices, when audible, challenge the status quo. Black women who raise their voice risk being labelled mad. Remembering her childhood in another Black Atlantic context to my mother's, the Southern US, yet during a similar era, Bell Hooks writes of how madness, not just physical abuse, was the punishment for too much talk if you were female. For my mother, resisting forces intent on silencing her is a prerequisite for sanity. And yet too often, her need to be heard is not acknowledged by practitioners who are unable to see and therefore connect with her subjecthood when she is unwell. Loss of voice underpins my mother's understandings of mental health. To her, and I'm quoting, "It's being locked up, sort of being in fear of going to the doctors for any little thing, because something I say may be taken out of context. I use the word arrested because that's how I feel, like there's no communication. I think mental health for me, I don't know if it's a label or me per se, but I feel, to me, it's like being locked up in an institution, whether you're inside or not being able to voice an opinion because straight away it's like you've got mental health. I listened to things about disability. Mental health is not mentioned, but it has such knock-on effects on myself and the family and everything. Mental health, I feel, is a curse I've had to bear. Having poor mental health has left Paulette with a voice without credibility, a voice that others struggle to listen to. In this sense, she has been cursed, and her voice has also been her saviour. Bell Hooks writes, I'm quoting again, "For us, true speaking is not solely an expression of creative power. It is an act of resistance, a political gesture that challenges the politics of domination that would render us nameless and voiceless. Moving from silence into speech is for the oppressed, the colonized, the exploited, and those who stand and struggle side by side, a gesture of defiance that heals, that makes new life and new growth possible. It is the act of speech, of talking back. That is no mere gesture of empty words. That is the expression of our movement from object to subject, the liberated voice." End quote. My mother prides herself on her refusal to sit down and shut up, to be an easy patient, to not question, to follow the status quo. She believes that this is what stops her from giving up and enables her to defy being institutionalized. As through talking back, she finds a sense of freedom, despite the possibilities of true liberation remaining out of reach. The deeper your marginalization, the more unlikely you are to be heard, regardless of how loud you shout. And as a black working class disabled woman, my mother's voice often falls on deaf ears. Having an unheard voice is dangerous when you are locked into a system that misunderstands you. It continuously reinforces barriers that restrict the ability to move from psychiatric object to sentient subject. Despite such barriers, voice and body is all she has. It is these resources she must draw upon in her fight to have her humanity acknowledged within a system that struggles to see and hear her.
And the importance of a testimony like that is for you who research history, is to kind of argue the reason intersectionality is important, because it shows the continuity historically that our experiences are still treated the same year in, year out. So let's hear it one more time for that.
I think when we were putting together this space, we knew exactly what we wanted it to be like, what we wanted it to feel like. We wanted it to be a space that centered Blackness, that made people feel at home in academia to some extent. You know, we wanted to create one of these spaces where people could come, could heal, could be enriched, but also do some really important work. And it's interesting for me looking at these pictures of how young I feel like I was at that point. Since then, like I said, I've gone on to have 2 children, and it just feels like a lifetime ago. But I think, for me, the retreats it really set me on my course as a sociologist. It really grounded in me the importance of intersectionality. I feel like up until this point, I had kind of been taught through my degree, you know, that we should only kind of focus on one thing, because, you know, there's not really room or space to talk about everything. And as a person that kind of thinks about the world through the lens of connection,
When did you first come together?
yeah, I thought we need to be closer, Kai, because this is going to have to be a collective remembering. The first one was 2016, and then we managed to arrange another one for the following year.
Yeah, it's 2018.
Okay, I was going to say, okay, so we had the first, so the first one was 2016. Then we came together. People prepared papers for that first event, and we came and everyone presented, but it wasn't like a normal conference where you go and you do a lot of listening. It was very broken up. So that happened. That was 2 days. We went away and we invited people to submit chapters for the book. We decided then that this should be a book. We knew it was something powerful. We wanted to capture it. So people then prepared and submitted papers, and we swapped them out. Right? We gave other people's chapters. So what we found from that event was actually sitting down and listening to the papers wasn't that helpful. It kind of ruined the kind of discussion time and where the power and the richness was. It kind of just took up too much time. So instead of everyone presenting their own paper, their papers were presented by somebody else, and discussion form, no PowerPoints or anything like that, was it? It was just, we took away from technology. So that happened, and then everyone had to, so that was kind of like the editing process. people came, they gave feedback, someone presented the idea, they presented the paper, and then the whole room, including Kim, fed back around what that chapter felt like, how it was heard, what was missing, what needed to be better. They then were tasked with taking this feedback and resubmitting their paper. I don't remember the deadline. Who knows when they came in. So then everything was kind of submitted by, let's say 2019? Yeah.
Let's say 2020.
Let's say 2020, okay. And then 2020 happened.
Who's going to read it? What they're going to say? But it wasn't bad. It felt okay. It felt safe because I wasn't making an error. I wasn't being told where's the white people in your work, where's the white women, where's the white women's experiences. I was told this. Well, in actual fact, my feedback was just make it more British, include examples around Black British women. And I was like, I can do that, easy. But it wasn't. So it felt safe, and that felt different to any other educational experience that I've been in, or space, you know, we go to conferences and people, what do you want to do? And you present it, or there's a paper and you listen passively. In actual fact, it was really helpful, and also to give feedback back on somebody else's chapter. I think I had Katusha's, who speaks about Brazilian women, her story. So that was also insightful to kind of give feedback, and her chapter is also in there as well. So I found it really, really helpful, and it's something that, in terms of that peer kind of support, I think it's something that we should do more within education, and I do think it helps us in terms of supporting the processes of being published, but also being able to share our ideas. We have these ideas in our head, but sometimes when we articulate and share them, we realise other people are thinking the same thing or have experienced similar things. So I do think that the process of the workshopping, the wind murder, all of those things, having fun through not just, you know, the heavy stuff, because some of the things that we look at and when we're writing about these things are personal experiences, they're painful, they're traumatic, so also having that downtime and fun is important.
I'm just going to second what you were saying. I think it was terrifying at first, the whole idea of having other people look at your work under a microscope in this way, but it wasn't a negative reaction. It allowed me to centralize the CRT, the critical race theory, in my argument more, whereas before it was to the left of center. I had race, I had gender, I had class, and I was wanting to have race central, but my supervisors and other people, and they didn't really know critical race theory themselves. I was teaching them in the process, and I was several dead white men theories were being pushed on me, and yes, I do use some of that theory as well, but it brought about it helped to concrete the importance of this is about race and that central, the roundabout we're talking about, rather than focusing that, oh, it's the gender, it's the class, and it's because they're from this background or what have you. And to get that from peers who looked like me and could relate to what I was writing was extremely, extremely refreshing when you're doing a PhD and you are the only one of one or two of us who were on the program, since we were both at Cardiff and we had a large PhD program, but we were in. I was in awe, I was terrified. It's just such a big presence, but I think one of the things that did help was the partying part, and having a scotch or whatever it was, a bourbon. I saw a different side of her then, and I was really concerned that the way I was looking at intersectionality was going to be completely torn apart by her, because I was looking at it with black men and not looking at women at all. My research now is on black men and women, but at the time this was specific to black men because they were less represented in the universities that I was looking at, and I thought I was going to be just annihilated, and I wasn't. She gave me a lot of good critical feedback, and I was taking notes and typing on the phone and everything, but I was absolutely terrified at first. It was just like a I'm not worthy moment at first.
Well, you know, when you spoke to her, did you feel like a student who just got a first? When she did you like good feedback?
It's hard to fully remember because I was kind of like a deer in the headlights, because it was just, I read so much of her work before, but then to see this, you know, she's here. She's come across the pond for us who are like new people who are like, we haven't finished our PhDs and we've just finished them. We're in the middle of it and she's gonna just tear everything apart. And she didn't. It was great, but you didn't, I don't know, I kind of was like a deer in the headlights. I was.
Kim, like some people, honestly, some professors will be very disappointed. But Kim's not like that. Honestly, I met Kim as a graduate student and just chatted. And I keep going to Kim because we're just friends now. And I just chatted to her. It was fine. And so I'll be honest, it never really happened with that because she's just really down to earth. And so when people actually got to meet her and drink with her and stuff, it was just like talking to somebody.
Really, really friendly, just relatable. When she, after my paper was read and the feedback, it was just like nods and smiles and, you know, words of kind of positive words. And so I just left reassured in terms of that my work was seen by her and she liked it. And I kept asking her, what did she think? What did she think? And you were like, it's good.
I think you know, Kim knows best. I remember when she first suggested the idea of like reading everyone else's chapters, and I was like, oh, I don't know how that's going to go down. And, you know, just like trust Kim. Kim knows best. She, like when I think back to it, I was in the first year of my PhD, I was just so naive in lots of ways, and yeah, there was just so much that she had so much to offer, and yeah, she was really generous with her time and how she kind of like just related to us and mentored us all over that weekend. So yeah.
One of the things for me that's really important is the power of the personal narrative, whether it's slave narratives, whether it's the voice of people who've been oppressed or just about to be home. The relevance of it is because you can historically understand what society is like by those personal stories. Counter storytelling in critical race theory is a counter narrative that challenges the dominant narrative, what we call the majoritarian narrative. So the next question really, and I don't know if you want to start this one, but it's the power of the personal narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I haven't tried to necessarily write what I did write, and you know, we could be protective over the personal and the extent to which we want to share that with other people. But we had a writing task, and it was about reframing intersectionality, and it was the only thing that would pop up into my head. It was just this, you know, it was kind of, I didn't do a PhD in that area or anything like that. It's too personal for me to want to study the experience of my life and my mother's life, and that's just too close to home. But it felt like with the lens of intersectionality, the tools of intersectionality in my back pocket, I could tell my mom's story, which I felt needed to be told. It's the only way. When I try to explain my frustration with these systems, sometimes people look at me like I'm kind of crazy and they don't really understand where the frustration is coming from, and in a way you need to know the story to understand my point. So I think I liked it because it enabled me to give that story the kind of honor and the kind of respect that it needed. But it could also be any other, like you said, any black woman's story. It's my mom's story, but it's so common, you know. And I think that's the power for me, is that you can tell someone's experience and anyone reading it can be like, I can see myself in this. I know someone that's had something similar to that, and you realize that it's part of a bigger whole.
I agree. My grandmother had mental health issues, so when you were talking actually at the event that we had, I was resonating so much with you. You probably wouldn't know what I was feeling it, you know? So I definitely did. In terms of my own chapter, firstly, as I said earlier on, I am a black woman who was born and raised in this country. So essentially the experiences that I talk about, education, employment, they are about me, they're about my sisters, and I'm talking in the kind of wider sense of global kind of community. They're about my mother, they're about grandparents, but to me it's really important to include through some of the interview extracts that I had from working with black students in university, trying to find out about their experiences, but also from my own PhD research. So you will always see snippets of black women and hearing from them directly, because although I am a black woman, I don't speak on behalf of every other black woman, and I suppose the very nature and virtue of intersectionality is that those differences, those nuances affect everybody differently in terms of if it's the educational experience. Now, as I started off by saying, my own PhD experience was tumultuous, but that doesn't mean that everybody else's was going to be as traumatic as mine, so people might have had good experiences. So for me, it's about understanding where other people are also at, but understanding a collective of black womanhood. We do struggle, but we also triumph as well. We're not just, always oppressed. There's other things that are also going on for us. So speaking around the kind of variations of our experiences and nuances of black womanhood is so important. But I start from a personal perspective and then work with others.
Experiences in, as I would call it, high school. And I failed miserably in trying to get the data. I wasn't using literary encounter storytelling then. And I was asking direct questions like, have you ever experienced discrimination? Have you been discriminated against? And someone who's lived half his life in the US and half his life here, if you ask that to a black man over there, they're going to be very direct with you and tell it like it is. And it doesn't work that way in the UK. It's about masculinities, it's also about we don't have the same kind of racism as you have. I've got all these kinds of stories and things like that. But through the power of the tools that are in critical race theory, the way that I changed how I interviewed and all, allowed these people to realize that they had these experiences. And hearing them, I mean, it was difficult for me because I was reliving some of the things I had experienced in the States in my experience of law school and masters and everything over there before coming here. And they were telling their truths this time, but when I asked them directly the way I had without using CRT, I just didn't get anything. And the thing that's also really important about this book is I'm already teaching it. I taught it 2 weeks ago, as soon as I could. And it's uncomfortable for some people that there are 2 or 3 chapters I do, because I'm at a predominantly white school where probably less than maybe 1 or 2 people in the class are people of color each time. And the stories that these men are raising about what teachers, what lecturers have said to them, or what students have said, and it's visceral. And they've had to read that before they come to class and we have the discussions. And it's just, there's so many parts of this. I have to thank Annabel for her part, because that's coming up in the fall for social justice. I'm teaching on that because everything I've had to do on disability has been very, very white, except when I've talked about some of the mental health for black men. But the way you brought it to light the first time when I heard it during our session, it just moved me. So I'm just glad it's out for that reason as well.